Let's talk about the prosecution now in the Ferguson, Missouri shooting death of unarmed teenager Michael Brown by police officer Darren Wilson. The St. Louis County prosecuting attorney here was Robert McCulloch. And as I told you, he announced that Darren Wilson would not be indicted for the death of that 18-year-old African-American man. McCulloch said that the grand jury, quote, gave up their lives while deliberating. And this was just, it seemed like such a boneheaded way to explain what the grand jury had been doing, because it is Michael Brown who lost his life. The grand jury who got to sit there and hear about the evidence that exists for certainly a period of time that I'm sure was an inconvenience to their lives. They did not give up their lives. And this immediately started raising all sorts of questions about this guy, Robert McCulloch. And it seems that we have uncovered a very, very disturbing apparent conflict of interest, a financial conflict of interest involving this prosecutor. I don't know how much of our audience has heard of this. You often want to follow the money, okay? And we did that, and Vox did that. And they found that in addition to his duties as the county prosecutor, Robert McCulloch is also the president of the Backstoppers Incorporated. This is an organization that fundraises for the men and women in uniform in Missouri and in Illinois. And in August, the organization was affiliated with a t-shirt drive that had a picture of Missouri and the statement, "I support D. Wilson." It was set up to raise money for the Darren Wilson Defense Fund, as well as the Backstoppers. That's right. The prosecutor in the case, who's in an adversarial situation relative to this police officer, was affiliated with a t-shirt drive that supported the officer who killed Michael Brown. There is a very reasonable argument here that there was a conflict of interest and that a special prosecutor, not Attorney McCulloch, should have been in charge here. And when we start looking at the data about what questions were asked during this grand jury, but more importantly, what questions were not asked, for me, even more red flags are raised. Legal expert Lisa Bloom pointed out on her Twitter account, very astutely pointing out a lot of the just obvious questions here. She said Darren Wilson should have been cross-examined in a different way. For example, he should have been asked, how did Michael Brown solidly, quote, full force, punch you twice in the face, and yet you had no injuries to reflect that? That's a question that should have been asked here. She also went on to say that a key to cross-examination would be requiring Wilson to explain how Michael Brown's allegedly taking one step toward Wilson is, quote, charging him, one of the allegations that was made by Darren Wilson. Wilson testified that he didn't think about whether Michael Brown was armed, but then he focuses on Brown's arm in his waistband, implying that there was a weapon. What about this obvious double standard or contradiction? He didn't think about whether Michael Brown was armed, but he focuses about Michael Brown's arm in his waistband, which clearly indicates he was thinking about whether Michael Brown was armed. Hospital records for Darren Wilson's same-day visit say, quote, he was well-appearing, well-nourished, and in no apparent distress. No one asked him to explain that report. And Wilson's hospital record says there was no bleeding, no laceration, and no bruising. This is a cross-examiner's dream, according to legal analyst Lisa Bloom, and this was not brought up according to the documents that were released during the grand jury. This is very, very strange. And you don't really have to create a conspiracy theory. You can just see that basic cross-examination questions were not asked, and we have found a conflict of interest between the prosecuting attorney and Officer Darren Wilson. These are questions that need to be asked, and instead, most corporate media focused on other sidebar issues to this.